Welcome to Worldbuilding Films, where we analyze the world, settings, and rules of films and TV shows to see if they work, if they don't, and if not, how they could be improved to enhance their stories. Today, we're talking about Pixar's latest attempt at milking the Toy Story franchise, Lightyear. Supposedly the quote-unquote real movie about Buzz that made Andy want to buy the toy in the first place. Yeah, sure, we'll see about that. And I mean it, cause while the idea can work, and I admit it was somewhat entertaining, it was shockingly far removed from what the appeal of Buzz should have been about. How far removed? Well, let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. Of course, there will be spoilers ahead. The plot. Our story begins with a crew of space rangers on a spaceship dubbed the Turnip as it was traveling through space, 4 million light years away from home, but found signs of alien life on a random planet called Takani Prime, which Buzz decides to investigate. It turns out to be a bad decision, however, as the planet seems to be inhabited by these huge vines that try to pull you underground, and in trying to escape again, Buzz accidentally damaged the ship and stranded everyone there. Thus, a mission goes underway for Buzz to travel around this planet's star, attempting to reignite this crystal that's the key to achieve hyperspeed travel. The experiment fails, however, and by the time he returns, he finds out that the travel caused a time dilation, so 4 minutes for him result in 4 years for the entirety of his crew. As a consolation, he's given a sort of robot therapy cat called Socks, whom, by the way, I thought I was gonna hate based on the trailers, but it turns out he's the best character in the whole movie. Buzz, however, doesn't give up so easily, so he decides to try again, and again, and again. Each time jumping 4 whole years into the future and seeing everyone around him age, determined that he has to find a way to finally bring everyone back home. Yeah, heads up, we're gonna have to talk about that later. After his nth attempt, his best friend Alicia Hawthorne becomes old, lived an entire life and grew a whole family and eventually dies. A shocking revelation for Buzz, you idiot, who now has to answer to a guy called Commander Burnside. He says that there's no need to continue the mission, that all the people there have decided they're just going to live on Takani Prime instead of trying to get off, since they already lived a whole life and raised families there. Buzz doesn't take this too well, however, and when it turns out that in the meantime Socks has discovered the real formula to get the crystals, he goes on one last attempt around the star, disobeying direct orders. And the experiment is a success, except this time he didn't just jump 4 years into the future, but something like 20. And now his people are under a protective laser dome so as not to be attacked by these sudden mysterious robots, led none other by the evil Emperor. Scratch that, just an entity named Zerg. Yeah, we'll get to that too. Who has taken control of the planet. Here Buzz meets Alicia's granddaughter, Izzy Hawthorne, who along with some other random people she found, is trying to form a rebellion against the robots and Zerg, even if poorly so. Lots of fun fighting and adventuring happens, and eventually they find their way on Zerg's spaceship, where Buzz discovers the real identity of Zerg, and it's none other than...
You look good, Buzz.
A future version of Buzz himself inside of a massive robot suit. Okay. It turns out that there was an alternate timeline where Buzz did succeed in returning with the fully powered crystal after his final attempt, but he was still hunted down by Commander Burnside, and had to escape with the crystal, accidentally launching himself like 100 years into the future where he stumbled upon a random abandoned alien spaceship. By the way, real quick, I should clarify that while alternate Buzz does find this advanced future technology, the film actually gives no explanation at all to its origins, never even clarifying if it's alien technology or human technology further into the future. It's just there, empty, up for grabs, and that's it.
At that speed, for that long, I traveled centuries. And I ended up in a future you wouldn't recognize. Filled with technology you can't imagine.
So, since the film itself just refuses to clarify, from here onward, I'm just going to assume that this is alien technology in the future. If you find any info that says otherwise, please let me know in the comments down below, because so far I found nothing. So apologies in advance if I'm going to take this big assumption, but I gotta work with something here. Alright, back to the show. and spent years trying again to recreate the crystal so that he could use it to go back in time instead, hoping to arrive before the turnip crash landed at all and prevent any of this from happening. But the crystal only took him so far, so future Buzz now needs present Buzz's current crystal to complete the mission at last. But current Buzz realizes that that means erasing Izzy and all of the others who have had their lives on Takani Prime, and decides it's not worth the risk anymore, angering future Buzz. Lots of fighting happens again, with pieces of technology being added to present Buzz's suit that will inspire his future design. A cute touch, by the way, not gonna lie. In the end, the day is saved, and for his heroism, Buzz is actually rewarded as leader of the new Star Command troops, with Takani Prime as their official new base, ready to explore the rest of the galaxy. Alright, so as you might have noticed, it's definitely a much more different story than what we expected this to be. Especially if, based on the opening title, this is supposed to be a film within the film of the Toy Story universe, done in the 90s no less. Good grief, if only we had those special effects back then. And it's double weird considering that, yes, Disney did make an actual animated show of Buzz in the early 2000s, and decided to completely ignore any of that in favor of this. And I don't want to necessarily just say that that show was better, but well, it was more in tune with the spirit of Buzz's universe. So, tempting as it may be, while we won't just say they should have just done that entirely and that's it, we will be taking some heavy notes from it at least. So, let's start with socks. The only examples of alien presences are the vines and bugs on Takani Prime, and the spacecraft that future Buzz finds and takes command of in order to gradually become Zerg. But even then, it's uninhabited, which in all honesty is kinda weird because it was just lying around there abandoned and up for grabs for anyone. Even for the alternate Buzz, whose earthbound technology is definitely less advanced and yet he's able to easily take control of it all. And, I'm not gonna lie, it is pretty frustrating to have these being the only alien elements in the whole damn flick in a movie that's based on Buzz freaking Lightyear. With that said, there is also one more sci-fi element that could be considered beyond human technology, and that is, ironically enough, socks. He's a companion robot in the shape of a cat whose only purpose is to do, well, just be an emotional assistance for Buzz, or whoever is their assigned patient, and that's about it. However, just look at what the hell he can do! He can sprout a blowtorch, an entire long-range fire extinguisher, he's got a USB, which is extra shocking considering this should have been made in the 90s and USBs definitely weren't a thing yet, but whatever. He can detect stuff around him, and he decoded on his own how to create the right crystal for freaking interstellar travel. I mean, sure, it took him like 60 years, but geez, that's a lot, especially when no one else succeeded, not even the onboard computers. In fact, it's so much that, dare I say, I wouldn't really consider it of human making. So, why don't we lean on that very idea? What if Socks maybe started off as a regular emotional support robot cat, but in the meantime, perhaps during Buzz's far too many attempts around the star, Buzz started noticing that there was something approaching from distant space. And with each jump, he'd notice that it was gradually approaching, with maybe some debris from it arriving first. And one piece of this debris could have been within reach in his later jumps, which he could collect in the meantime on his way back to Takani Prime, analyze it, and perhaps it accidentally latched onto Socks. And then, it turns out, this thing could have actually been part of an alien spacecraft, perhaps even the very same one future Buzz will have discovered in his own timeline. And when our Buzz accidentally gave it to Socks, it would enhance his capabilities far beyond his original programming was. Maybe even with something like nanotechnology. Plus, it would give at least better motivation for Buzz to keep doing these goddamn time jumps because, let's be honest, it's an incredibly stupid move to do them over and over again. Look, okay, small tangent. The film didn't even show that each time the chances of reaching hyperspeed were getting higher or something. At least that would motivate him to keep pushing and experimenting. But no, there was no reason to do that at all, and yet he knew the goddamn consequences. He should have stopped to properly assess the entire situation and give the scientists more time to figure this problem out. Instead, this just made Buzz look incredibly stupid and reckless. Almost as randomly stupid as they made him in Toy Story 4, which is already saying something.
That little voice inside me would never leave me alone if I gave up.
The voice inside of you. Who do you think it is?
You know, my conscience? That part of you that tells you things? What you're really thinking?
Fascinating. So your inner voice advises you.
It's a secret mission in uncharted space. Let's go.
But where's the highway?
The slingshot maneuver is all we've got. Full speed ahead.
Thanks, inner voice.
Okay, fine. Rant over, back on track. But anyway, yeah, this whole using a piece of alien tech is honestly the only way you could at least justify both Socks being this smart and capable all of a sudden, and Buzz being this ridiculous all along. Sorry, for real, I'm done. Star Command. Part of the appeal of Buzz Lightyear is the fact that he is part of the Space Rangers, who go out into the galaxy protecting thousands of planets and civilizations. Pretty much an intergalactic space force like the Nova or Green Lantern Corps. And it's heavily implied that they travel from one alien planet to another, giving ample room to show plenty of creative worlds. And yet in this film, all we see is this one damn single alien planet called Takani Prime. Sure, it has these moving vines that pull you down and these other giant bugs, but that's kinda it. And they don't really impact the story much aside from being occasional obstacles. So maybe one would think Star Command doesn't exist if universal protection isn't the main mission. Yet we're clearly told that this is indeed Star Command. Buzz even mentions it several times in his mission log.
Buzz Lightyear to Star Command. Come in, Star Command. Star Command, come in.
Why don't they answer?
And we know that canonically Star Command is supposed to deal with alien races. Case in point, even in the original Toy Story, one of the most iconic aliens are the Little Green Men, which are nowhere to be seen here. Even the animated series showcases them and even more different colorful alien species. But no, in this film it's just freaking vines and bugs. Riveting. In fact, it seems to be implied that Buzz's mission is more so to discover other planets. That would ironically make them closer to the Starfleet Federation and Star Trek than anything else. Not only that, but the people of the Turnip, despite having some pretty advanced technology that does allow them to travel through space, just remain stuck there for several generations during Buzz's failed attempts, to the point that whole lives pass by and they just decide to call it quits and make Takani Prime their new home. But if they really are the Star Command that we know, would they really be stuck there for that long if they have at least achieved space travel before and are already planet hopping? I understand that light takes a long time to travel through space, and they are like 4 million light years away from Earth, and that they need the hyperspeed crystal in order to get back, but they should have had the exact formula already with them. Or at least they should be able to explore nearby planets instead of being stranded on just one. Especially if those vines really are causing that much trouble. Is it really such a downgrade of the original Star Command that it has nothing to do with the original concept aside from the name? Well, with what's presented, yeah, it kind of is. But it could work if the era is shifted a little. What if this wasn't just a cheap knockoff, but the actual Star Command in its very early days? Maybe the people on the mission were indeed like the absolute top of what humanity could achieve, and they were the first ones to be sent out of the solar system to see if they could indeed survive and colonize beyond it. However, for all their achievements, they still were not able to contact other civilizations yet. At most they would have discovered that there was sentient life like animals and plants and whatever, but that's it. They were still on the lookout for first contact, which would give even extra motivation for Buzz to have course corrected on Takani Prime. because the computer detected that life existed, but since they were so close, he had to double check if that life had civilization. What he didn't know was that it would have been more dangerous than expected, which makes me think all the more that he shouldn't have rushed in, but I guess we can wave it off as him being still immature and brash at the beginning of his story, so okay, fine, I guess. And it would give him even more reason to be so hard-headed on returning to the original mission, because they were supposed to be working on a much bigger picture, and Takani Prime was too small a piece to matter. And look, because it really irks me and I can't help it, we can also say that the reason they weren't able to just recreate the hyperspeed crystal is if the device that made them was the thing that was damaged during Buzz's attempt to escape the planet, forcing them to try alternate methods such as supercharging one near the planet's star. So with all of this in mind, considering the people decide to live there for several generations and are just expanding and adapting, if we have a star command that is only barely exploring the universe, this really could have been just the origins of the entire operation. And if we added our idea from earlier that the alien spacecraft Zerg/future Buzz found had some highly advanced alien tech, by the time the events of the film are over, present Buzz's people could reverse engineer it all, including socks, and advance a lot in a short time span, to the point that they don't need to live on Takani Prime anymore, and instead build something better, something like, you know, an orbiting space station exactly like the one in the Buzz Lightyear show. Because yes, fun fact, the planet shown in the show isn't actually Earth. Instead they just call it Capital Planet. Very original. So, if this is just the origin, then in the future, Star Command would rename Takani Prime like that, and with their newfound tech and gradual discovery of alien civilizations, they'd change their original objective from exploring the universe to protecting it, especially now that they have upgraded their suits to the iconic ones from the Buzz toys. And so, with all of this in mind, the writers really should have gone with this route all along, where all the pieces they laid out actually were to serve the purpose of laying the groundwork for what will become the greatest defense force in the galaxy, Star Command. Zerg. Now, I'm pretty sure we all knew that the choice of Zerg's real identity was going to be, well, controversial no matter what. On the one hand, his very first appearance ever was in Toy Story 2 as a toy, designed to be Buzz's sworn mortal enemy. And he was clearly designed to be a Star Wars parody just for a quick laugh, to the point that they included this familiar line.
You killed my father!
No, Buzz. I am your father.
On the other hand, in the Buzz Lightyear animated show, since I'm sure Disney didn't expect fans would actually be that invested in him, that very thing Zerg was supposed to parody ended up being changed again.
Buzz, I am your father. What? Psych! Made you look, you dimwit!
So with that in mind, I kinda understand the writers deciding that this film had to change course and not just be a parody of Star Wars, making Zerg actually a future version of Buzz just to spice things up. But while the animated show has its fans and steered away from that parody, let's face it, the Toy Story 2 version is also the one everyone actually knows. Way less fun than the show, don't get me wrong. Zerg was so enjoyable and charismatic there, but less popular as well by comparison. So yeah, the adaptation in this film would have been a loss either way. And yet, with all that said, it's not that the future Buzz as Zerg didn't work because of his lineage, but because, father or no father, they f***ed up by not making him a freaking emperor. He's supposed to have ruled over who knows how many goddamn entire civilizations with an iron fist. And even if we take the end credits seriously of future Buzz Zerg whatever being still alive, he's still an old man inside, and he'll never have enough time to conquer thousands of planets before he just croaks. Plus, our Buzz isn't supposed to know who he is, much less at their very first meeting, otherwise what's the point of setting up their future rivalry? So what could have been the best option? Well, to be honest, it would have been best just to make him someone entirely different and most vaguely connected to Buzz himself, but I also kind of feel that that's just too easy. Instead, maybe we can still find a way to play around with the elements given to us in the film. So, while not a perfect one, here's my proposal. We could even say that this Zerg was indeed a future timeline version of Buzz, and he did indeed escape and end up on an alien spaceship. But since it would be really convenient for it to be empty, what if it was still inhabited by some hostile alien race? Here it is, the first contact that this entire mission was supposed to aim to accomplish, and it's perhaps a ruthless species who imprisons and tortures him for years. During this entire time, alternate Buzz would begin to realize that the original mission would have been doomed from the start. That humans would have been in trouble the moment they also met the species with their superior advanced technology and robots. But, being the cunning space ranger he is, over time he would also start to gradually learn their customs, their language, and how their tech works. Decades passed by, and perhaps he could have understood this species enough to the point of even manipulating or tricking them, pretending to be on their side and working in their servitude. Only then, years or decades later, at the right moment, he would seize control of whatever advanced technology he could and take over the ship all on his own with all the information he slowly gathered over time. If these events happened, his new goal would have still been to use the hyperspeed crystal to go back in time, not just to bring his people home, but to warn everyone that there was danger coming.
That's it. No more liver for you.
And the moment his people wouldn't take him seriously, after decades of hardening himself, he'd find ways to scare them with this idea of enemy aliens by creating the image of Zerg himself, or force them to make another hyperspeed crystal, since his ran out, so he could go back to before the mission even started and warn Star Command that there was no point to look for advanced civilizations because his experience showed they were too dangerous to interact with at all, even if he didn't actually know if this was the case for all other species as well. And in order to keep on with this mission, he'd use that advanced alien tech to build his robot army and, especially, his Zerg suit, fully improved to be as menacing as he made everyone else believe. In fact, I'd go even further by proposing he was slowly beginning to even merge with it, flesh and metal in one, to keep himself alive since he was so old. Towards the end, when he's defeated, present Buzz could maybe even see that future Buzz was dislodged from his own suit and indeed died like in the middle of space or something. But what he wouldn't have taken into account is that the suit, being so advanced, could have perhaps absorbed most of the memories of future Buzz in the meantime, and reached a point where it gained its own consciousness. A twisted one, however, forged between a protocol to conquer other civilizations based on the tech of the evil alien species, and all the memories, knowledge, training, and newfound hatred for one Buzz Lightyear, and everything having to do with him, including Star Command. The birth of the perfect foe. So when we see Zerg's body come to life again in the end credits, it's not future Buzz, that way we don't have to worry about cheesy predictable twists anymore, but a new independent foe that calls itself Zerg, who will go on and conquer civilizations with an iron fist in a robotic body as is canon, and even Buzz would have no idea who this new Zerg would be since future Buzz is indeed dead. And thus, while not exactly a faithful adaptation, in the years to come, Buzz and Star Command would see, and have accidentally and unknowingly created, the rise of the greatest threat to the galaxy. A ruthless machine with the mind of a twisted human, with Buzz Lightyear as the one person who will fight for justice for all these other species. The beginning of the one, the true, the only Emperor Zerg. And the rest, as they say, is history. A history that should now be available on freaking Disney Plus instead of this.
To infinity and beyond!
So that was Lightyear. Like I said, it isn't great, it's definitely far from a faithful adaptation, the supporting cast isn't that interesting at all, and it definitely does not feel like something Andy would have been this obsessed with in the 90s. With that said, I also can't say that it's flat out bad either. It has some charm to it, and it's definitely something that entertains. It's just that it feels exactly like what it is. Another desperate attempt at milking the Toy Story franchise. And considering that it didn't actually do the numbers Pixar was hoping for at the box office, perhaps the Mouse of Mouse can finally learn to finally let this toy franchise stay shelved. Unless you do a Socks movie. Now that's where the money is. Anyway, that's all for today, folks. What do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I talking out of my ass? Maybe. Let me know in the comments down below. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Please consider subscribing to my Patreon to help support what I do here. And if there's any other franchise whose world building you'd like analyzed, let me know. Until next time, keep building worlds.